Before we begin the story, please write in the comments what part of the world you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can keep growing and bring you even more interesting stories. That morning began like any other in the small Brooklyn apartment Emily and Jason had built together. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the scent of the avocado toast Emily was preparing. For her, this routine was her anchor, a simple reaffirmation that her life was on track, that her 5-year marriage was built on love and mutual understanding. She placed 2 plates on the table, poured coffee into Jason's favorite mug, and smiled with satisfaction. She was happy with this simplicity, a happiness she thought would be eternal. Jason walked into the dining area with an oddly heavy step. His face, usually cheerful in the mornings, was now etched with a worry he couldn't hide. Emily noticed it instantly. She set her knife down on her plate and looked at her husband with concern. "Honey, what's wrong? Why do you look so tense?" Emily asked softly. Jason sighed deeply, as if gathering the strength to deliver bad news. He sat across from Emily, but his eyes wouldn't meet hers. His gaze was fixed on the steam rising from his coffee cup. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I have some bad news," he said in a low voice. "My sister just called from back home in Charleston. Mom is in very bad shape." Emily's world seemed to stop for a moment. Carol, her mother-in-law. Although their relationship couldn't be described as warm, Emily had always held a deep respect for her. Carol was certainly a tough figure, often making subtle jabs about Emily's humble origins, but Emily had always tried to be understanding. To her, Carol was still the mother of the man she loved deeply. "What happened to her, Jay? How is that possible?" "I just spoke with Jessica on the phone the day before yesterday, and she said she was perfectly fine." Emily's voice trembled, holding back anxiety. Her mind immediately raced, imagining the worst-case scenarios. "She said she collapsed suddenly last night. Her blood pressure shot through the roof. Right now, she's bedridden. I have to go right now, Emily. I'm her only son. I have to be there," Jason said with a tone of feigned urgency. Without a second thought, Emily stood up from her chair. Her instincts as a wife and daughter-in-law took over. "Of course. Let's go, Jay. I'll get ready right now. We'll go together. I can help take care of your mother there." Jason looked up, and for the first time that morning, he met Emily's eyes, but his gaze was strange. There was a fleeting panic he tried to conceal with a forced smile. "No, honey," he refused quickly. Far too quickly. Emily frowned. "Why not? I'm your wife and her daughter-in-law. It's normal for me to go see her and help out. I can ask for the day off from work." "It's not that." Jason took Emily's hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'm just going for a couple of days, at most, until Mom is stable. The drive down to Charleston is long and exhausting. I'd feel bad putting you through that. Besides, the house there is small. A lot of family will be coming over. You wouldn't be comfortable. I promise I'll keep you updated every moment." The reasons sounded logical. They sounded like a display of concern, yet a small voice in Emily's heart told her something wasn't right. Why was her husband so insistent that she not go? In a situation like this, wasn't a wife's support what was needed most? "But Jay, that's—" "Honey," Jason cut her off abruptly, this time with a firmer tone that left no room for debate. "You stay here, take care of the apartment, and pray for Mom to get well soon. That will be more than enough for me. Now, please help me pack a bag with clothes for a couple of days, okay?" Emily finally gave in, pushing her unease deep down, convincing herself that Jason was only trying to spare her the trouble. With a heavy heart, she went to their bedroom and opened the closet. Her hands deftly selected several shirts, t-shirts, and pants for Jason. She even tucked Jason's vitamins and personal medications into the bag, making sure her husband wouldn't lack for anything during his stay. Every piece of clothing she folded felt like a prayer, a sincere hope that her mother-in-law would recover quickly and her husband could return to her side. An hour later, Jason was ready to leave. He hugged Emily at the door, a hug that felt empty and rushed. "I'm leaving, Emily. Take care. I'll call you when I get there." "Actually, now our visit." Emily nodded, trying to smile through the turmoil in her heart. She kissed the back of her husband's hand and watched his car pull away until it disappeared around the street corner. The cool morning air now felt sharp, and the usually warm apartment seemed immensely empty and silent. After locking the door, Emily returned to the dining room to clear the dishes. Her mind was still filled with worry. As she went to pick up the denim jacket Jason had left on the back of a chair, a small piece of paper fell out and fluttered to the floor. The paper was crumpled, as if it had been in the jacket pocket for a long time. Emily picked it up without suspicion, thinking it was just a receipt or a random note. However, as she unfolded it, her eyes locked on the words written there. It was a piece of letterhead paper with the logo of a well-known, luxurious catering company from her husband's hometown. Below the logo was a detailed order for hundreds of buffet servings and food stations. Emily's heart began to beat faster. Then she saw handwriting she recognized as Jason's at the bottom of the paper. A small note written in black pen, "Final 50% payment due on the eve of Jessica's event." Emily read the sentence over and over as if trying to decipher a foreign language. Jessica's event eve. Didn't that mean tomorrow? Why was there a luxury catering order for her sister-in-law's event? Just when Carol was supposedly bedridden, gravely ill? Her logic fought against her feelings. Maybe it's an old note, she thought. Maybe it's just a simple family celebration. She tried to find justifications, any reason that could calm her heart, which was beginning to burn. But she couldn't ignore the fact that the date printed in the corner of the paper was for the following day. What lie were they actually hiding from her? The first day without Jason felt endless. The apartment suddenly felt like a lonely cage. Emily tried to keep busy with work and cleaning, hoping physical activity would distract her mind from the catering note she had found. She now kept that note in her dresser drawer. It felt like a ticking time bomb, about to explode. Every time she glanced at the drawer, her heart would race again. She tried to convince herself not to think negatively, to trust her husband. In the afternoon, Jason finally called, just as he had promised. Emily answered the phone, full of hope. "Hi, Jay, how's your mom?" she asked without preamble. "Hey, honey, I just got here," Jason replied from the other end. His voice sounded tired, but there was something else in it, something that sounded forced. The background of his call was strangely quiet. There were no sounds of prayers or conversations, typical in the house of a sick person, just silence. "How is she? What did the doctor say?" Emily pressed. Mom is resting. The town doctor saw her. He says she needs a lot of rest, no stress. I just finished giving her a massage," Jason answered, stuttering slightly. Emily sensed something was wrong. "Why don't you take her to the hospital, Jay? If her blood pressure is that high, it's dangerous." "She doesn't want to, Emily. Mom doesn't want to. You know how she is about hospitals. Come on, don't worry so much. Just pray for her. Okay?" Jason said. He seemed eager to end the conversation quickly. "I want to talk to her, Jay. Just for a moment. I want to hear her voice." "You can't." "Emily, she's sleeping deeply after taking her medication. It's not good to wake her. I have to go. Okay? I'm going to take a shower. I'll call you later." And before Emily could respond, the call disconnected. Emily stared at her phone screen with a sense of emptiness. The conversation hadn't reassured her at all. On the contrary, it had fueled her suspicions even more. She tried calling back a few hours later, but her call was declined. Shortly after, she received a text message from Jason. "Sorry, honey. The reception here is terrible. I'll get back to you later." Bad reception. Since when was there bad reception at his mother's house? Hadn't they just installed a cell tower near the town only a month ago? The lie was too obvious, too clumsy. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind was filled with all sorts of terrible possibilities. She felt like a fool being blatantly deceived. To be certain, she tried calling Jason's sister's number and several of his cousins. The result was nil. No one answered, as if they had all conspired to isolate her from the truth. The next day, anxiety turned into an obsession. Emily knew she couldn't just sit back and do nothing. She needed proof. She needed certainty. She opened her laptop and began to browse social media, a desperate act she never imagined she would have to do. She started with Jessica's account, her sister-in-law. The account was private. She moved on to the accounts of distant relatives, endlessly scrolling through their walls, searching for the slightest clue. After nearly an hour of fruitless searching, she was about to give up. Maybe she really was overthinking it. Maybe she was wrong to suspect her own husband. But just as she was about to close her laptop, a name caught her attention. The account of a distant cousin of Jason's who lived in another city. Emily remembered this cousin was very active on social media. With a slightly trembling hand, she opened the cousin's profile. Her heart leaped. The most recent post, from just 30 minutes ago, was a photo. It wasn't a photo of a sick person or a mournful atmosphere. It was a photo of a huge, beautiful bouquet of white roses and lilies. The bouquet was placed on a table with a satin tablecloth, and in the background, the decor of a lavish wedding altar was visible. Emily held her breath as she read the caption. The printed words slapped her across the face. "Congratulations on your new life, Jessica and Mark. May you be a happy and blessed family. Sorry I couldn't be there, but my best wishes are with you. Jessica." That name again. So her gut feeling was right. The catering note wasn't old. Today was Jessica's wedding day, a lavish wedding they had hidden from her. And what about the news that Carol was gravely ill? Emily felt a wave of nausea. It was all a lie. Her mother-in-law's illness, her husband's concern, it was all part of a grand charade, a farce deliberately designed to push her away. Anger, pain, and humiliation churned in her chest. She didn't cry. Her tears seemed to have frozen over with an icy rage. So this was the reason she couldn't go. This was the reason everyone was silent. They didn't want her there. They considered her unworthy to be part of their family's happy day. With fingers trembling with rage, Emily typed the name of the wedding planner, whose logo appeared on the catering note, into the Instagram search bar. The account appeared instantly, and at the top of their profile was a colorful circle, indicating they were broadcasting live. Emily felt her heart was about to pound out of her chest. With a single click, she entered the live stream, and her world shattered. Emily's world shrank to the 6-inch screen of her phone. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat, leaving her breathless. The live stream continued without a pause, uncaring that hundreds of miles away, a woman's world was crumbling. The first thing she saw was a hotel ballroom transformed into a dreamlike garden. Thousands of white roses, lilies, and orchids hung from glittering crystal chandeliers. Round tables with silk tablecloths were impeccably set, surrounded by guests in their finest dresses and evening suits. A soft orchestra filled the room with an atmosphere of luxury that stabbed at Emily's heart. This wasn't a family celebration. It was a declaration of opulence. The camera panned across the sea of people before finally settling on a bride and groom at a magnificent altar. There was Jessica, her sister-in-law, looking like a fairy tale princess. Her dress was covered in thousands of light-reflecting crystals, and her smile was wide and happy. Beside her, Mark, her husband, looked handsome and elegant. They laughed, greeted guests, and posed for photos. There was not a trace of sadness there. Then, Emily's eyes searched for her husband, for her mother-in-law, who was supposedly bedridden and gravely ill. It didn't take her long to find them. The camera focused on the row of family members standing near the altar, and there she saw her. Carol, healthy, radiant, and as haughty as ever, was wearing a custom-made, sage-colored designer gown covered in shimmering sequins. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, and gold jewelry adorned her neck and wrists. Her face glowed with pride as she greeted guests of honor, showing off the success of her daughter's wedding. There were no IV drips, no pale face, no signs of someone who had just suffered a health crisis the night before. Next to Carol stood Jason, her husband, the man who had embraced her that very morning with a lie. Jason wasn't wearing the wrinkled shirt he usually wore in his hometown. He was in a tailored suit that fit him like a glove, his hair neatly styled, and a smile that never left his lips. He looked happy, laughing with his relatives, patting friends on the back. He looked exactly like a proud brother on his sister's wedding day, not like a son worried about his mother's serious illness. Seeing them all there, laughing in their exclusive circle of happiness, Emily felt something inside her break. The pain was unbearable. It was the pain of the deepest betrayal. She hadn't just been uninvited. Her very existence had been erased under the pretext of a cruel lie. They considered her so insignificant, so bothersome, that they had to invent a drama just to ensure she would never set foot at that party. Just then, as if fate wanted to pour gasoline on the fire already consuming her heart, the camera zoomed in on Carol, who was chatting animatedly with a sophisticated-looking middle-aged woman. The music volume lowered slightly, allowing their conversation to be heard quite clearly through Emily's phone speaker. "The party is spectacular, Carol. Congratulations on Jessica's wedding," the woman praised. Carol laughed. Her laugh sounded arrogant and satisfied. "Thank you, dear. You know how it is. As parents, we want to give our children the best. Everything has to be perfect." "Of course. Hey, by the way, where is Jason's wife?" "I haven't seen her all night." Emily held her breath. Her heart stopped, waiting for the answer that would decide the fate of her marriage. Carol clicked her tongue, waving her hand in the air as if shooing away an annoying fly. Her expression soured slightly, as if she were talking about something unpleasant. "Oh, don't even mention her," she said with a dismissive tone. "Thank goodness Jason's wife didn't come. What an embarrassment. With that country bumpkin look of hers, she would have humiliated us in front of the whole family. People would think we let our family marry just anyone. Better she stays home." Shattered. That word wasn't even enough to describe what Emily felt. The phone slipped from her limp hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud that broke the silence of her apartment. Country bumpkin. Humiliated us, not up to their standard. The words echoed in her head. Each syllable felt like a whip's lash, so this was the real reason. This was the verdict they had passed on her long ago. In their eyes, she was nothing more than an embarrassment to be hidden away. All her kindness, all her dedication for 5 years, all her efforts to be a good daughter-in-law meant nothing. In the face of status and prestige, Emily was just a shameful speck of dust. The laughter and music from the live stream, still playing on the floor, seemed to mock her, laughing at her stupidity. In the midst of that party's magnificence, her dignity had been trampled until nothing was left. After the live stream ended, Emily sat on the floor for hours. The silent house became a mute witness to the destruction of her heart. She didn't scream, she didn't break anything, she just sat still, letting the pain devour every cell in her body. At first, she felt only a paralyzing emptiness. Her mind was blank, her heart numb. But slowly, that void began to fill with an overwhelming wave of sadness. The tears she had held back finally broke free. She cried. She cried for her foolishness in having believed so blindly. She cried for the 5 years of her life she had dedicated to the man who had conspired with his family to humiliate her. She stumbled to the bedroom. She opened her wedding photo album. There, her and Jason's faces smiled happily, full of hope for the future. That photo now seemed like a cruel joke. She hugged the frame. Her tears wet the glass, blurring the beautiful memories that now felt false. Every corner of the house that once felt warm now reminded her of the lie. The sofa where they used to watch TV together, the kitchen where she always prepared Jason's favorite dishes, the bed where they shared their dreams. Everything felt contaminated. She cried until her eyes were swollen and her voice grew hoarse. She allowed herself to sink into a sea of pain, expelling all the poison of betrayal from her system. However, as night gave way to day, as the first rays of sun began to filter through the cracks in the curtains, something inside Emily changed. Her tears stopped flowing. The burning sadness slowly cooled, crystallizing into something else, something harder, sharper, and more dangerous. A cold anger and a fiery determination. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, swollen, pale, and pathetic. That wasn't her. She was not a victim. She would not let them turn her into a weak woman who resigned herself to her fate. Carol had called her a country bumpkin. Jason considered her an embarrassment. They were about to see what the woman they had underestimated was capable of. An idea began to form in her mind. An idea so bold, so crazy, it scared her a little. But that fear was quickly overcome by the desire to reclaim her dignity. She wouldn't go to Charleston to confront them. That would be too easy, too predictable. It would only give her a momentary satisfaction and confirm their image of her as a dramatic woman. No, the best revenge was to prove that she could stand on her own and be happy without them, that her world wouldn't collapse just because they hadn't invited her to their arrogant party. Her mind immediately focused on the one thing that gave her strength, her financial independence. All this time, Jason had always insisted that Emily's salary be transferred to a joint account. The reason sounded sweet. To make it easier to manage the family finances, honey. The account was opened in Emily's name with Jason as an authorized user. Emily, who had always trusted her husband, agreed. She never realized that all this time, almost 90% of that account's balance came from her hard work, from the bonuses and overtime she had slowly accumulated. It was that money that, without her knowing, had funded Jason's lifestyle and helped his family back in Charleston. That was the power she felt upon realizing this. She had control. With hands that no longer trembled, Emily opened her laptop and logged into her bank's app. Her heart pounded as she saw the string of numbers of the balance on the screen, a very large amount, the fruit of her sweat over the years. Without a moment's hesitation, she took action. She transferred the entire balance from the joint account, leaving only the minimum, to her personal bank account that she had opened long before getting married, a secret account that Jason had never known about. In a matter of seconds, the transaction was complete. The funds had moved. She had taken back what was hers. Next, she opened an airline's website. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, typing in a destination she had once mentioned to Jason as her dream spot. A dream Jason had always laughed at, saying it was too expensive and unnecessary. Rome, Italy. She found the next available flight for that very night. She didn't care about the price. She booked a one-way ticket. A one-way ticket. A wordless declaration that she had no plans of returning. When the booking confirmation email arrived in her inbox, Emily felt an overwhelming wave of freedom. The weight on her shoulders seemed to vanish. Before shutting down her laptop, she did one last thing. She sent a text message to her best friend. "Lauren, I'm leaving the key to the apartment under the planter by the front door. I have to be away for a while. If my husband looks for me, tell him I've gone to find the dignity I lost." The message was sent. She closed the laptop. The plan was in motion. The tears had dried, replaced by a faint smile filled with the promise of a new beginning. Emily acted with a chilling calm, a cold precision born from a shattered heart. There were no more doubts. She opened her large closet. Most of its contents were a reflection of the woman Jason and his family expected her to be. Simple clothes, modest blouses in neutral colors, long skirts she had bought because Carol once commented that a good daughter-in-law didn't wear jeans. She looked at these clothes with detachment, as if viewing someone else's wardrobe. Her hand bypassed all of it, reaching for the back of the closet, where she kept her true identity. A few dresses she had bought with her own money, but rarely wore, a pair of jeans that fit her perfectly, and several modern blouses she had hidden away. This is what she would take. She wasn't just packing a suitcase, she was curating her life. She gathered her college diploma, her birth certificate, and other important documents, placing them in a waterproof folder. She took her laptop, her weapon for work and independence. She also took a small photo frame from her bedside table, a picture of her laughing with her late parents. That was her true source of strength. Then her eyes fell on the jewelry box on her dresser. Inside were several gold necklaces and bracelets Jason had given her early in their marriage. She once considered them signs of love. Now she saw them as chains, a way to make her feel bound and indebted. She closed the box. She wouldn't take them. She didn't want to carry anything that felt like a tether. Her steps led her to the full-length mirror. There, on her left ring finger, still sat a white gold wedding band with a small diamond in the center. She raised her hand, remembering her wedding day, the sacred vows Jason spoke, the look filled with a love that turned out to be false, and the moment this ring slipped onto her finger as a symbol of their union. That symbol now felt like a brand of ownership, a sign identifying her as property of Jason's family. With a slow, deliberate movement, she pulled the ring off. The skin underneath looked pale and strange, a mark of the union that had lasted 5 years. Her finger now felt light, free. She didn't throw the ring. Explosive anger wasn't her style. She placed it carefully on the dresser, right next to the silver-framed wedding photo. Then she picked up the frame and calmly turned it face down, hiding the happy smiles of two people who were now strangers. The message was clear. This marriage was over. Her large suitcase was now full. She dragged it to the living room, pausing for a moment in the doorway. She looked at every corner of that apartment for the last time: the plush sofa, where she often fell asleep waiting for Jason to come home late from work; the immaculate kitchen, where she experimented with new recipes to please her husband; the walls she had painted herself in her favorite cream color. This home had been built with her love and her hopes. Leaving it was like tearing out half her soul, but she knew the soul that remained would grow back, stronger than before. She wrote a brief note for Lauren, her friend, and left it on the dining table. Then she walked out, closing the door behind her without looking back. She slid the apartment key under a large planter on the patio, exactly as she had told Lauren. A taxi she had called arrived promptly. The driver helped her put the suitcase in the trunk. During the ride to the airport, Emily remained silent, gazing out the window. The flickering city lights seemed to bid her farewell. Her mind was no longer filled with anger or sadness, but with thrilling anticipation. She felt like a fugitive who had successfully escaped from prison, running toward a new world she had never known. There was fear. Of course, fear of loneliness. Fear of uncertainty, but that fear was far better than the pain of being humiliated and belittled. John F. Kennedy International Airport greeted her with a hustle and bustle that contrasted with the calm in her heart. People rushed to their flights. Families embraced in farewells and reunions. Emily walked alone through the crowd, but she didn't feel lonely. She felt whole for the first time in a long time, having only herself to think about. The check-in and security process went smoothly. Each step felt like a ritual that moved her further and further away from her past. When the TSA agent stamped her passport, she felt as if she had been given an official permit to start a new life. She waited in the departure lounge, watching the giant planes arrive and depart. When the boarding for her flight to Rome was announced, Emily stood up and walked steadily toward the gate. Inside the plane, she had a window seat. She stowed her bag, sat down, and buckled her seatbelt. This was the moment, the point of no return. The plane began to move slowly, then faster and faster, until it finally lifted off the runway with a powerful roar from its engines. Emily felt her body pressed against the seatback and pressed her face to the window. She watched as the bright lights of New York City grew smaller and smaller below her, turning into beautiful points of light before being finally swallowed by the darkness of the night. Above the clouds, the sky was dark and clear, adorned with millions of stars that seemed to welcome her. At 30,000 feet, when the seatbelt sign turned off, Emily took out her phone, opened it, and went to her contact list. She found the name, My Husband. Her finger hovered over the name for a moment. Then, without hesitation, she pressed the block button. A confirmation notification appeared. She tapped it. Done. Then she searched for the name Mother-in-law Carol. Block. Sister-in-law Jessica. Block. One by one, she cut all the digital bridges connecting her to that family. She cleansed her life of their poison. When she was finished, she switched to airplane mode. She leaned back in her seat, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 2 days, she felt peace. Outside the window, the plane continued to cut through the night, carrying her toward freedom. The air that greeted Emily as she stepped out of Fiumicino Airport was a gust of cool wind that chilled her to the bone. The Roman autumn enveloped her. Although her body trembled slightly, her heart felt an immense warmth. This was the air of freedom. Around her, signs were written in an Italian she barely understood. People spoke in a language foreign to her ears. She was completely alone in a foreign country. That feeling, far from frightening her, was incredibly exhilarating. Emily didn't choose to stay in a crowded tourist hotel. She had booked a small, clean, and modern studio in the Trastevere neighborhood through an app, a quieter area, famous for its unique cafes and bohemian atmosphere. She wanted to live like a local, not like a tourist on the run. After a quiet taxi ride, where she could only communicate with the driver through a translation app, she finally arrived at her apartment. The space was small, but it had everything she needed: a comfortable bed, a small kitchen, and a large window overlooking a quiet street. This was her palace, her new kingdom. The first few days in Rome were about adaptation and small victories. Going to the supermarket for the first time was an adventure. She walked through aisles filled with unfamiliar products, trying to read the labels with the help of an app, and managed to buy the ingredients to cook her first pasta dish, cacio e pepe. Eating alone in a small trattoria, ordering a hot plate of carbonara, and enjoying it without anyone bothering her, felt incredibly peaceful. Every small task she managed to complete on her own, buying a transport pass, deciphering the metro routes, ordering a coffee in hesitant Italian, felt like a major achievement that rebuilt the self-confidence she had lost long ago. She realized the jacket she had brought from New York wasn't warm enough for the cool Roman nights. This was an opportunity, a chance to shed the old image that had been attached to her. She went to a shopping center on Via del Corso, her eyes immediately fixed on a long, camel-colored coat made of cashmere wool. The coat looked elegant, warm, and expensive. Before, she would never have dared to buy it. Jason would have complained about the extravagance, and Carol would have criticized her for dressing above her station, but the Emily of now was different. She entered the store, tried on the coat, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman in the mirror looked confident, elegant, and classy. Without a second thought, she took it to the register and paid for it with her own money. Wearing that new coat was like putting on armor, a new identity she had chosen for herself. The next day, she went to a salon and cut her long hair into a shoulder-length bob, fresher and more modern. The old Emily was dead, and now she was reborn. One morning, about a week after her arrival, Emily woke up to a strange silence. The sound of traffic she usually heard faintly had disappeared. She got out of bed and opened the curtains. The view that greeted her took her breath away. A radiant sun bathed the city, dyeing the rooftops a magical golden color. The streets were adorned with fallen leaves in shades of ochre and red. The beauty was so surreal, so magical. For her, this golden autumn was a symbol, a clean, blank page, an opportunity to rewrite her story. She couldn't resist. After making herself a hot chocolate, she put on her new coat, boots, and a scarf. She went out into the street, feeling the gentle autumn breeze on her face. The small park near her apartment had turned into an autumn paradise. Children laughed as they played among the leaves, and some couples strolled hand in hand. Emily walked alone, but she didn't feel envy. She felt peace. She stood under a tree whose branches were almost bare. She felt so happy, so free, so alive, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. She wanted to capture this moment, not for others, but for herself, as a reminder that she could find happiness in the midst of the coldness of her world. She saw a tourist taking pictures of the landscape and kindly asked for her help. "Could you take a picture of me, please?" she said in English with a smile. She positioned herself in the middle of the park with the perfect autumn backdrop. She didn't pose sadly or melancholically. She smiled the most genuine smile she had ever offered, a smile that came directly from her now light heart, a smile of victory, of freedom, and of hope. Back in her warm apartment, she looked at the photo on her phone screen. The woman in the picture looked so different from the woman who was crying on her apartment floor just a few days ago. The woman in the picture was strong. The woman in the picture was happy. She felt an impulse. She opened her Instagram account, which she had always kept private. She changed the setting to public, then uploaded the photo. The photo of her radiant in the middle of the autumn landscape. She thought for a moment about the caption. No words of resentment or anger were needed. Her dignity was too high for that. She just needed to express her truth. She wrote a simple sentence that summed it all up. Finding warmth in the middle of autumn. A new chapter begins. With a tap, the photo was uploaded to the virtual world. She left her phone on the table, face down. She didn't care about the number of likes or comments. She had already achieved what she wanted, an affirmation for herself. She turned around, looked out the window at the sun that continued to shine softly, and took a sip of her hot chocolate. She felt at peace, unaware that thousands of miles away, that simple post had landed like a bomb, ready to blow up a wedding and devastate the world of those who had betrayed her. In the glittering hotel ballroom, Jessica's wedding was in full swing. Carol stood elegantly near the altar, a permanent victory smile on her lips. She accepted every compliment from the guests, with her chin held high, as if all this luxury were tangible proof of her family's status and dignity. Jason, standing not far away, played his part as the perfect brother, greeting friends, laughing at unfunny jokes, and making sure all the important relatives felt attended to. Everything was going according to plan. Everything was perfect. In their bubble of false happiness, Emily was just a minor detail they had successfully pushed aside, a problem solved. They didn't know that this problem had just mutated into a disaster. The small apocalypse didn't begin with an explosion, but with a whisper. A young cousin, bored with the ceremony, opened Instagram to browse. Her eyes widened as she saw a post from an account she didn't recognize, but whose profile picture was a very familiar face, Emily. The photo appeared in her Explore feed, perhaps because some of Emily's friends, whom she also knew, had liked it. The photo of a woman smiling in an autumn park with a brief but poignant caption. Without a second thought, she nudged the aunt sitting next to her. "Auntie, look, it's Jason's wife," she whispered. The phone changed hands. The aunt's eyes widened, and she quickly passed it to another relative at the same table. Within minutes, Emily's post spread from table to table like a digital plague. The festive buzz of the party slowly became contaminated with rumors. The guests' laughter began to sound forced. Furtive glances started to be directed toward the immediate family, who were still oblivious. The previously warm, festive atmosphere began to cool, charged with a strange tension. An aunt from the groom's side, who had long disliked Carol's arrogance, saw this as a golden opportunity. With a sweet, venomous smile, she approached Carol, who was bragging about the price of her daughter's wedding dress. "Carol, dear, congratulations. The event is wonderful," she began politely. "Oh, by the way, how lovely to see your daughter-in-law, Emily, on vacation. How wonderful to be able to travel abroad, and to Italy, no less. Jason is so lucky to have such an independent wife." "Enwade," Carol frowned, not understanding. "On vacation? Emily is at home. You must be mistaken." "Oh, really?" The aunt pulled out her phone with a rehearsed gesture. "Well, look, she just posted this photo an hour ago. She looks gorgeous, dear. I almost didn't recognize her." She thrust the phone in Carol's face. For a moment, Carol just stared at the screen, confused. Then, her eyes locked on it. She saw Emily's face, smiling radiantly against a foreign, autumnal landscape. She saw the elegant, camel-colored coat. She read the caption, "A new chapter begins." Carol's previously glowing face turned ashen. Her smile vanished, replaced by an expression of shock that quickly morphed into fury. "Jason, come here," she hissed sharply, her voice trembling. Jason, who was chatting away, turned and walked over to his mother. "What's wrong, Mom? Look at this." Carol shoved the phone at him. Jason saw the picture. He saw Emily's smile, a smile he had never seen before. It wasn't the soft, submissive smile he usually got at home. It was the smile of a free woman. The caption was a slap in the face. What did a new chapter mean? Panic began to grip him. How could Emily be in Rome? When did she leave? With whose money? Just as Jason's mind was reeling and a cold sweat began to bead on his forehead, another, much more urgent problem presented itself. A professional-looking woman with a badge that read Event Director approached him with a tight smile. "Good evening, Mr. Jason. I'm sorry to bother you," she said politely, but her gaze was sharp. "As per our contract, I just wanted to confirm the payment for the remaining 50%. Our finance team is ready in the back room." Jason, his mind still scrambled by Emily's photo, tried to wave her off. "Later, please, the event isn't over yet." "I'm sorry, sir. According to procedure, the payment must be completed before the event ends at 10 p.m. "It's already past 9, the woman insisted in a low but firm voice. Carol, who overheard the conversation, nudged Jason. "Finish this at once. Don't make a spectacle of us," she whispered furiously. With a mix of panic, anger, and humiliation at being called out in the middle of the party, Jason walked heavily, following the director to a makeshift payment table in a corner of the room. Several guests' eyes were now fixed on him. He pulled his debit card from his wallet with an arrogant gesture, trying to salvage what little dignity he had left. "Here you go," he said, handing over the card. The assistant swiped the card through the terminal. A few seconds later, the machine beeped softly, and a terrible red text appeared on its screen. Transaction declined. Silence. The assistant looked at Jason uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, sir. It was declined. It must be the connection." "Try it again," Jason said, his heart starting to pound. She tried again, with the same result. "There must be a problem with the machine." Jason excused himself, his voice beginning to tremble. He tried to laugh, but only a dry, strange sound came out. "I'll just do a transfer from my phone." In front of the director, who was now looking at him with suspicion, Jason opened the banking app on his phone. His fingers felt stiff. He entered his password, and the app opened. He tapped the menu to check the balance, and when the figure appeared, he felt his breath catch. His vision blurred. The number on the screen was absurd. $14.82. 4 digits, not the 6 that should have been there. Tens of thousands of dollars, the fruit of Emily's hard work for years, which he considered his, had vanished. With trembling hands, he opened the transaction history. There, on the top line, was a transaction made the previous afternoon, a transfer of a gigantic amount to another bank account. He didn't recognize the account number, but the name of the holder was clearly written, Emily Garcia. The reality hit him like a freight train. Emily hadn't just left to spite him. She had planned it. She had taken back every last cent of her money. The money he was supposed to use to pay for the rest of his sister's wedding, the money that was the foundation of all his family's luxury and arrogance that night. Jason looked up from his phone screen. In front of him, the director was waiting impatiently. Around him, the whispers of the guests were growing louder, and in his mind, the image of Emily's smiling face in Rome kept replaying. He was trapped, socially shattered, and now financially ruined. All at once, in the middle of the most lavish party his family had ever thrown, he had just realized he was broke. The silence in that corner of the ballroom was so thick it seemed to insulate Jason from the ongoing festivities. He remained frozen, his gaze lost on the bank balance on his phone screen. The event director, standing before him, was losing her patience. Her professional smile had vanished, replaced by a rigid, cold expression. "So, what's the plan, Mr. Jason?" "We need to settle the accounts tonight," she insisted, her voice no longer friendly. Jason couldn't answer. His mouth was dry, his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. What could he say? That he had no money? That his fortune had just been stripped away by the wife he considered a country bumpkin? Carol, whose instincts told her something was terribly wrong, hurried over. Her face was red with anger and embarrassment. "What is it now? Why are you taking so long? Just pay her." "Don't turn our family into a spectacle," Carol hissed, her voice low but laced with tension. She snatched the phone from Jason's hands, wanting to see what was making her son act like an idiot. Her eyes went straight to the banking app's screen. She saw the pathetic balance. For a moment, she didn't understand. Then she saw the transaction history. She saw Emily's name there. Carol's face went from red to a deathly white. She swayed slightly, as if she had just taken a devastating blow to the stomach. "This can't be," she whispered weakly. Then she looked at Jason, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her anger erupted uncontrollably. "You stupid boy! What have you done? Why was all your money in her hands? Why can't you control your own wife?" she shrieked, forgetting they were in the middle of a crowd. The shout immediately silenced the music. Every eye in the room turned toward them. The drama, which had been mere whispers, had just become the main event. Guests stopped eating, stopped talking, and watched with morbid fascination the downfall of this honorable family. News of the non-payment spread like wildfire backstage. The event director signaled her team. One by one, representatives from the other vendors began to approach the family. The burly owner of the catering company, the stern-faced decorations manager, even the head of the sound system, formed a semicircle around Jason's family like a pack of wolves cornering their prey. The magnificent party had turned into a public trial. "Excuse me, Mrs. Carroll, Mr. Jason. We also need to receive our final payment. My employees have to get paid tonight," the caterer said in a threatening tone. "Exactly. These imported flowers don't pay for themselves with promises," the decorator added. The family was completely cornered. Jason's father, who had remained silent until now, tried to mediate. "Gentlemen, ladies, please calm down. Of course, we will pay. Just give us a little time." "The contract says tonight." The caterer cut him off cynically. "If you don't pay, we're stopping service right now. No dessert, no coffee," he threatened loudly, making sure all the guests could hear him. That threat was the height of humiliation. The guests began to whisper even louder. Some even brazenly took out their phones to record the unfolding shame. Jessica, the bride, ran down from the altar. Her luxurious gown now seemed like a costume from a failed show. Her face was soaked with tears. "Mom, Dad, what's happening? Why is this happening?" she sobbed. In the midst of her desperation, Carol did something everyone present would remember that night. With hands trembling from rage and unbearable shame, she unclasped the ostentatious gold necklace she had been flaunting. The jewelry, which was the symbol of her status, she thrust at the caterer. "Take this as collateral. Its value is more than enough to cover what we owe you," she spat. The image of a high society matriarch forced to hand over her jewels to pay a debt in front of hundreds of guests was a drama too juicy to miss. The flashes from cell phones went off everywhere, immortalizing the moment of Carol's downfall. The dignity she had built and protected for years shattered in an instant. The party ended in chaos. Guests left hastily, not out of sympathy, but so they could be the first to spread the juiciest news of the night. They left with full stomachs and enough gossip material for a month. An hour later, the once gleaming ballroom was empty. Only the members of Jason's family, Carol, his father, and Jessica remained, standing amidst the lavish decorations that now seemed like a monument to their failure, surrounded by impassive creditors. The uncomfortable silence was finally broken by Carol's explosion of rage, directed once again at Jason. "This is all your fault. The fault of that country bumpkin you chose. I told you from the beginning not to marry her. Look what's happened." "It's not Emily's fault, Mom," Jason retorted, his voice finally emerging, hoarse with desperation. "It's our fault. Your fault for always humiliating her. My fault for being too cowardly to defend her. We pushed her away. How dare you blame your mother?" Jason's father, who had only endured the shame in silence, finally roared with a thunderous voice that shocked them all. "Enough! You're both the same. Your arrogance, Carol, and your stupidity, Jason, have destroyed this family's good name. Now figure out how we're going to pay all these debts." The wedding, designed to be the pinnacle of their social achievement, had become the tombstone of their reputation. They were not just financially bankrupt, but socially bankrupt as well, trapped in shame, surrounded by debt. And now, the family they had boasted so much about was beginning to blame each other, cracking from within. The drive back from Charleston to the city was, for Jason, like a journey to the gallows. The car sped through the night, but his mind wasn't on the road. It was trapped in the hotel ballroom, now a monument to his family's shame, in the cynical gazes of the guests, and in the zero balance of his bank account. Throughout the entire drive, he relentlessly tried to contact Emily. He used his phone, his father's phone. He even stopped at a gas station to borrow a phone. The result was always the same. The call wouldn't connect. The message wouldn't deliver. Emily had built an impenetrable digital fortress. It was like shouting into a void, and desperation began to suffocate him. When his car finally entered his Brooklyn neighborhood at dawn, a small, irrational hope sparked in his mind. Maybe it had all been a nightmare. Maybe when he opened the door, he would find Emily sleeping on the sofa, waiting for him. Maybe there was a logical explanation for everything. That hope shattered the moment he crossed the threshold. The apartment felt different, not just quiet, but empty, hollow. The air inside was cold and stale, not like usual, always warm and scented with the aroma of food or Emily's favorite air freshener. Emily's slippers, which were usually neatly placed by the door, were gone. Her work bag wasn't on the table. There was no trace of her life. The apartment was now just a building with furniture, no longer a home. With heavy steps, Jason walked through each room as if on a tour of a museum of bitter memories. The gleaming kitchen seemed sterile. There were no more little notes that Emily used to stick on the fridge door. The living room was tidy, too tidy. The sofa cushions were arranged rigidly, as if no one had touched them in days. His heart beat faster as he climbed the stairs to their bedroom. The bedroom door was open. What he saw inside was the final confirmation of all his fears. The closet was slightly ajar, and he could clearly see that Emily's side was completely empty. Only empty hangers remained. His side was still intact, but now it seemed strange, lonely. His eyes drifted to the dresser, and there he saw it. The image that destroyed what was left of his heart. A white gold wedding band lay on the cold wooden surface. Next to it, the silver frame with their wedding photo was turned face down. Jason approached like a sleepwalker. His trembling hand picked up the ring. It was cold and dead. It no longer had the warmth of Emily's finger that used to encircle it. With a hesitant gesture, he turned the photo frame over. Emily's face in the photo looked back at him, smiling with sincerity and love, the smile of a woman he had betrayed in the cruelest way. An overwhelming regret hit him, making it hard to breathe. He collapsed onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. The contained sobs finally broke free, filling the silent room. The following days were a living hell. Jason lived like a ghost in his own home. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep, he just tried to contact Emily and all her friends, getting no response. The shame of the wedding followed him back to the city. Some coworkers, who were also distant relatives, began to keep their distance. The gossip had spread. The financial blows soon followed. His phone rang incessantly. It wasn't Emily, but the bank and credit card companies. The automatic payments for his cards, which he used to treat his friends and buy gifts for his family, were all declined. The pile of bills he normally ignored, knowing Emily's salary would take care of them, now seemed like a mountain of paper monsters ready to devour him. He realized he had been living in an illusion of stability. Emily wasn't just his wife. She was the financial backbone that supported his entire lifestyle. And now that backbone was gone. Exactly 1 week after his return, as he sat brooding on the dusty patio, a courier delivered a large brown envelope. His heart pounded. Could it be a letter from Emily? An explanation? An apology? With trembling hands, he signed for the delivery and eagerly tore open the envelope. Its contents were not a love letter or an explanation. They were sheets of cold, rigid, official paper. At the top of the first page, in bold letters, it read, "Summons for initial hearing of divorce petition." Below, his name as the respondent and Emily Garcia as the petitioner. The family court had already set a date. It all seemed so final, so irrevocable. As he pulled out all the contents of the envelope, a small object fell into his lap. A savings passbook. A personal passbook in Emily's name, whose existence he never knew about. He opened it and saw a record of impeccable transactions. Then, a small folded note slipped out from the last page. Emily's neat, firm handwriting was etched on it. "Thank you for managing the fruits of my hard work all this time. Now, enjoy the fruits of yours." There was no anger, no sadness, just a cold, piercing statement of fact. It was the final blow, a perfect checkmate. Jason felt all the strength leave his body. He slid from the chair, falling to his knees on the cold patio floor. The court summons and the small note were scattered around him. He had lost everything: his wife, his dignity, and his future, all because of his own stupidity and arrogance. 6 months later, time had separated two worlds that were once united. In a modern office building in the heart of Manhattan, Emily stood before a whiteboard, enthusiastically explaining her business concept. Her new office wasn't large, but it was bright and filled with positive energy. On the wall hung the logo of the company she had built from scratch. Free Spirit Journeys, with the tagline, "Empowering women, one trip at a time." Emily's appearance had completely changed. Her hair, now in a chic cut, framed a brighter, more determined face. She wore a blue pantsuit that made her look professional and classy. But the biggest change was in her eyes. There was no longer any doubt or insecurity, only a gleam of intelligence, confidence, and serenity. Her travel business, specializing in solo female travelers, had been a huge success. She wasn't just selling tour packages, she was selling experiences, courage, and independence. She had become an inspiration, living proof that a woman could rebuild her world from ruins and turn it into an even more magnificent kingdom. Meanwhile, in another world that seemed very far away, Jason's family was paying the price for their actions. To cover the mounting debt from Jessica's wedding, they were forced to sell the family home in Charleston, a disgrace that became the talk of the town. Carol, once so respected for her social status, was now a somber, remorseful old woman. She shut herself away in a small rental house, not daring to go out and face the cynical stares of her neighbors. Jessica's marriage wasn't as beautiful as her dress either. It started with scandal and debt, and their home was filled with fights, especially since Mark's family never stopped bringing up and belittling her family's fall from grace. Jason's fate was the most tragic. The pressure of the divorce and financial ruin caused him to lose focus at work. After several warnings, he was finally fired. He had to sell his car to cover some of his credit card debt. Now, the man who had always been impeccably dressed worked as a part-time event waiter at a 5-star hotel, a job he got through the compassion of an old friend. He lived in a tiny room in a boarding house on the outskirts of the city. Every day, he was tormented by the image of Emily and an infinite regret. Fate, with its ironic sense of humor, finally brought these two worlds together. Emily was celebrating the launch of her spring travel package at an elegant cafe in the lobby of the hotel where Jason worked. She was the center of attention, surrounded by travel bloggers and journalists from women's magazines. She laughed, answered questions intelligently, and exuded an overwhelming aura of success. Jason, in his ill-fitting black and white uniform, was on duty in that area. His job was to ensure the guests' water glasses were always full and dirty plates were promptly removed. When he saw Emily for the first time after so long, he felt as if all the air had been knocked out of his lungs. That woman, the one who used to make him breakfast, the one he considered a country bumpkin, was now sitting there, shining like an unreachable star. She was so beautiful, so majestic, so far removed from his current world. An immense shame and pain consumed him. He tried his best to go unnoticed, moving between tables like a shadow, his head bowed. But as he went to pick up a tray of dirty glasses near the table where Emily was being interviewed, his nervous hands suddenly trembled. Crash! The tray fell with a deafening clatter, shattering several glasses and spilling their contents on the floor. The noise made everyone turn, including Emily. For a fraction of a second that felt like an eternity, their eyes met. Jason looked at Emily with an expression loaded with a million feelings: burning shame, deep regret, and a painful longing for the life he had thrown away. Emily looked back at him, but in her eyes there was no hatred, no anger, not even pity. There was only a fleeting, calm, and distant recognition, the look one gives to a vaguely familiar face from a very distant past. She gave him an almost imperceptible nod of her head, a polite gesture one gives to a hotel employee who makes a small mistake, an acknowledgement, not an invitation to speak. Then, with incredible elegance, she looked away and refocused on the interviewer as if nothing had happened. "I'm sorry, where were we?" "Ah, yes, about the safety tips for women traveling solo to Rome." For Emily, the incident was just a 2-second interruption in her busy day. For Jason, that subtle dismissal, that quiet indifference, was far more painful than 1,000 insults. He had been erased from Emily's life, reduced to a mere clumsy stranger. The cafe manager rushed over and scolded him, ordering him to clean up the mess immediately. As he knelt to pick up the broken glass, Jason could only hear Emily's confident laughter in the distance, the voice of a world he could never enter again. That night, after the success of her event, Emily stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking at the lights of New York. She was no longer thinking about Jason or the broken glasses. Her mind was filled with grand plans for her business, for her future. She had won, not by seeking revenge, but by building her own happiness. She had shown the world, and, most importantly, herself, that a true queen doesn't need to reclaim an old throne. She builds her own palace, far more magnificent than the last, and there she lived happily ever after, alone and complete. 2 years later, time, like a patient sculptor, had reshaped the lives that were once broken and had worn away the masks of falsehood. The two worlds, once united by marriage, now revolved in their own orbits, separated by distance, destiny, and an unbridgeable chasm of regret. The first world was centered in Rome on a magical autumn afternoon. The leaves on the trees along the streets had turned into a sea of gold, and the crisp air promised the arrival of winter. Emily strolled peacefully along a path in a lush park, the same park where, 2 years prior, she had taken the photo that changed her destiny. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her, a group of women of various ages and backgrounds walked beside her, listening intently as she told them the history of a nearby palace. They were the latest group from Free Spirit Journeys. Emily's business had grown exponentially. She now had a small team in New York and several local partners in Italy. She no longer just sold tickets and hotels, she designed experiences. The trips she offered were pilgrimages for souls seeking a new direction, a constructive escape. Her clients were women at crossroads, newly divorced, tired of their corporate jobs, or simply in need of time to reconnect with themselves. Emily was more than a tour guide. She was a mentor, a fellow traveler. That afternoon, as the tour was about to end, a young woman from the group named Sarah approached Emily. Her eyes looked a little sad. "Emily," she called out softly, "seeing you so passionate and happy here is incredible. I came because I just left a job that was making me miserable. I feel lost." Emily stopped and looked at Sarah with a warm, empathetic smile. She saw a reflection of her former self in the young woman's eyes. "2 years ago," Emily said in a calm voice, "I came to this very park for the first time. It was autumn. I came alone, not on vacation, but on the run. I felt lost too, or worse, I felt insignificant." Sarah looked at her, surprised. "Really?" "Really," Emily continued. "But then I realized that being lost isn't the end of everything. Sometimes we have to get lost to find a new path that turns out to be much more beautiful, a path that is truly our own. Don't think of this trip as an escape, Sarah. Think of it as your first step on that new path." Those words, spoken with the sincerity of someone who had lived it, seemed to empower Sarah. She smiled, this time more genuinely. "Thank you, Emily." Seeing the change in Sarah's face gave Emily a happiness that money couldn't buy. This was her new purpose in life, to transform her wounds into light for others. That night, after ensuring all her clients were safely back at the hotel, Emily didn't go straight to her apartment. She went to a small, traditional cafe in the Monty neighborhood. She sat alone by the window, sipping a hot ginger tea and watching the bustle outside. She felt completely at peace. Her happiness no longer depended on the presence of a man or the validation of others. Her happiness was whole, born from within, from her achievements and the peace in her heart. She had found her true soulmate, herself. Meanwhile, in the second world, thousands of miles away, happiness was a scarce commodity. Jason now worked as a clerk in a logistics company on the outskirts of New York. His job was monotonous, entering data from morning to night in a small, windowless, poorly ventilated office. Every day was a repetition of the last. He would leave his small room early, squeeze onto the commuter train, work for 8 hours, and then return to the loneliness of his room. He had managed to pay off most of his debts, but the price was his youth, stripped away by remorse. Every night before sleeping, he had a painful ritual. He would open Instagram. He no longer searched for Emily's personal account. He had known for a long time he would never find it. He opened the business account, Free Spirit Journeys. He saw the photos of Emily smiling in various beautiful locations in Italy. He read the testimonials from clients who praised her. He watched his ex-wife's success in high-quality images. Each new post was like a small stab to his heart. He didn't hate her. The hatred had long evaporated, replaced by a bitter admiration and an endless sense of loss. He knew the woman on the screen was the result of his decisions. He had thrown away a diamond and now had to settle for living in the dust. Back in Charleston, the fate of Carol and Jessica was no better. Carol now lived with Jessica and Mark in a modest rental house. After selling the family home, her arrogance had been eroded by hardship. She had become quiet and sickly. Every time she heard the neighbors talk about the success of their children, she felt a sharp pain. Sometimes she missed Emily not out of love, but because she missed the stability and comfort that Emily had indirectly brought to their lives. Jessica's marriage was on the brink of collapse. The shame of her wedding became a wound that never healed. Mark and his family never stopped bringing up the topic of the debts and embarrassment they had caused. Fights were a daily occurrence. The fleeting luxury of her wedding day had been exchanged for years of misery. Ironically, Jessica now often complained about how hard life was, the same complaints she used to hear from Emily and had always silently mocked. The culmination of fate's irony occurred one weekend evening. In Rome, Emily took her group to the Pincian Hill to watch the sunset over Piazza del Popolo. From there, the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of stars. The night wind tousled her hair. Surrounded by the laughter and happy faces of the women she had helped, Emily gazed at the infinite horizon. Her world felt immense, her future stretched out bright and full of limitless possibilities. She felt on top of the world, literally and figuratively. At almost the same time, in a dark corner of New York, Jason had just arrived back in his room after an exhausting day. He opened the small, barred window. The view was not the glitter of city lights, but the back wall of another building and a narrow, dirty alley. The air was thick and humid. He could hear an argument in the next room and the roar of a motorcycle piercing his ears. His world felt so small, so confined, so suffocating. He looked out, but there was no horizon to see, only a wall. Emily, on top of the hill, took a deep breath, feeling the fresh, clean air of freedom. A sincere smile graced her lips. Jason, at the bottom of the alley, sighed deeply, feeling the heavy, thick air of despair. They were no longer connected, but their lives remained a reflection of one another. One was a portrait of the courage to start anew, the other a painting of eternal regret. The best karma, in the end, was not the total destruction of the oppressor, but the opportunity for the victim to rebuild her life so high, so brilliantly, that not even their shadow could reach her anymore.